Today's lesson is section 1.1, talking about real numbers. So here we're not going to cover everything in this section, but we're going to cover the highlights or the things that we kind of need you to know before we move on to chapter 2, and that'll be the same with the rest of the chapter 1 that we talk about in sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to just discuss the things that we think we need to go over to kind of refresh your memory from last year in advanced algebra or algebra 2. So let's get started. So here, finding common denominators property. So here, if you have two fractions with different denominators, the easy, quick way of doing that is cross multiplying and then multiplying your denominator. So you take a times d plus b times c to get the numerator, and you're adding those together. And then to get the common denominator at the bottom, you just multiply the two denominators, which is easy to do. So here, if you have example 1, where it says simplify 4/7 plus 8/13, it means either evaluate or put into simplest form. So here, when I'm multiplying my stuff, 4 times 13 will get me 52. And then 7 times 8 will give me 56. And then if I multiply 7 times 13, that gets me 91. And so then you want to add your numerators. If they're like terms, sometimes you'll have variables in there, so you may not be able to add them. But that's okay. So then 52 plus 56 gives me 108 over 91. Always check to see if you can reduce your fraction, but 91 is a prime number, so you will not be able to. So then this would be your final answer for that simplification. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Here there's some symbols that you need to know. So let's say that if a and b are sets of real numbers, and then we're using these certain symbols, so this U looking symbol in between the A and B, this upside down U, and if you see a 0 with a line through it, those three symbols mean certain things. The U means that it's a union between the two sets. So the union means all elements in A or B. So think about a Venn diagram here. So you have A, you have B, so then all the elements that A has or that B has, whichever one, like your number that you're looking for in or so like overlaps or contains. The upside down U is considered an intersection. That's the in-between area right there, and where the two circles overlap is called the intersection, and that's where the elements are common to both A and B. And then the circle with a line through it means empty set. That means or says that A and B have no elements in common. So if you were drawing a Venn diagram for that, you would have something that looks like this. Okay, so therefore there's no intersection, basically. So there's nothing that they both share. Now another thing that we need to talk about is inequalities. Now we're going to use something called interval notation for this. It's just a different way of describing our inequalities. And so instead of writing like x less than a or x greater than a or less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, we're going to use different symbols, which are parentheses and brackets. It's a little quicker way to do it, but it's just something that we'll use for the rest of the semester. And anytime that you're asked to write an inequality, this is the form I would like it in, is in interval notation from now on. Okay? So if we're writing x is less than a, think about this as your number line, okay? And you're writing this, graphing this out on a number line. Remember, you would have an open circle at the value for a. And since it says less than, you would draw your line less than the a value, so you're going to the left. and you're going to forever in the left direction. Okay? So here, another way of describing that is saying that you're going from negative infinity to a, so that's where this negative infinity comma a is. So you're saying the lowest number and the highest number that contain that inequality, and then you put a certain symbol around that, which is either a parenthesis or a bracket. So the parentheses are going to represent your less than's or your greater than's, and they mean open intervals, so it's like where you'd have an open circle at. Okay? If you have a less than or equal to or greater than or equal to symbol, then that means it's a close interval, so that's where we'd fill in the circle, and so that would be a bracket. Okay? And that's what we'd use for those. So I have some examples here, like up here, if I have x is greater than a, then now a is the smallest number, because now we're going to open circle at a and then shade everything to the right of a. So the highest number that we're going to get is infinity. So that's where you get a comma a, and that's why we have parentheses here. Okay? Now I just did the same thing with the less than or equal to signs and the greater than or equal to signs in the same situations. Notice that the only thing changes is a bracket near the a. Okay? So the parentheses and the brackets where you put them next to that certain number, the number closest to it, represents what interval it is. Okay? Now one thing to remember is that infinity and negative infinity, because we don't really know what infinity is and we can never get to it physically, therefore we're always going to consider it an open interval, so it's not a closed, like it's not cut off. So you always use parentheses with infinity. Okay? So let's do some examples here with some real numbers. So let's say I want you to rewrite into interval notation a is less than 7. Okay? So I always think, what's my smallest number? And I write that first. So since it's saying a is greater than 7, 7 is the smallest number because everything's going to be bigger than that. Okay, so I write 7. And then, since I'm greater than 7, there's no other number that's going to tell me. So then I know I'm going to infinity. Okay? And that's it. Now from here, I need to look at my inequality. Okay? I already know infinity has a parenthesis by it, but I also need to know if my 7 has a bracket or a parenthesis. So since it's greater than, that fits into a parenthesis, so then that would be my answer. Okay? Now if you ever have trouble looking at these and thinking about which way we're going, you can always draw a number line out. So like this one, if I do for negative 3, now here I'd have a closed circle because it's less than or equal to. Okay? And since it's less than, I would shade to the left. Okay? So then now, since you're going to the left of negative 3, the smallest number in this case would be negative infinity. And the biggest one would be negative 3. Okay? Now, like I said, negative infinity, infinity always have parentheses. So I put a parenthesis there. And then negative 3 is including, because it's equal to it, so then I have a bracket. Okay? So that'll be my answer. Now, sometimes you have compound inequalities, obviously, right? So it's not always going to go to infinity or negative infinity. So you have two numbers already told to you, which is actually kind of easier because they already have your numbers right there. So the smallest one's always on the left, which would be negative 3. The biggest one's usually on the right. It's 8. Okay? And they obviously are. Negative 3 is smallest. 8's bigger than negative 3. Now you just need to look at the inequality attached to their number. So negative 3 is attached to less than or equal to sign. So then that means that's a bracket. 8 is attached to a less than sign. So then that's a parenthesis. Okay? And so then that would be my answer. Okay? Now you don't have to draw the number lines and graph them unless they ask you to graph. But just know that if it doesn't, you don't have to. It's just something visual to help you connect those two different ways of writing the inequalities together. Okay, and so the last thing we'll talk about is distance. So distance between 2 points A and B on the real line, so real number line, is described as D parenthesis A comma B. So don't think of this as like interval notation there. It's more so like it's two values that they're comparing to one another. And so then that's going to be equal to the absolute value of B minus A. Okay? So remember that your absolute value always makes it positive. So it doesn't really matter which order you put them in. If they don't tell you which is A and B, don't worry about it. Just put them in an order and subtract, and then the absolute value sign will take care of the rest. Okay? So 2 is more, so our distance is going to be from -8 to 2. So the distance would be 2 minus a -8. Remember, they already have a minus in there. Don't forget if they have a negative number attached to that. So double negative makes it positive, so that makes it 10. And the absolute value of 10 is 10. Remember, that just makes it positive. It doesn't change the sign. So if you want to try one, for any of these videos, you can always stop the video, try it yourself, and then compare the answers to me, and see if you're getting the same thing. It's a good way of practicing. So here I have 5 and -7. So then here, -7 minus 5. So then -7 minus 5 gives me -12. And then absolute value of -12 is 12. Okay? And that's all you kind of need. Those are the highlights of section 1.1. Okay? Have fun.